Hello, and welcome to this, thank God the bye week is almost over, edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, and more melancholy than usual, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com, VikingsJournal.com, and also host of a new podcast titled the Scold Folks Home Podcast for the elder gentleman / Vikings fan. I am here with a elder gentleman / Vikings fan, Mr. Joe Oberly.
Wow, I feel like I've got podcast envy because you guys all have other podcasts, and this is one. This is all I got, man. This is it.
The people
I just
your
bring
own
it all.
podcast.
I bring it all right here. I bring it all right here. You know, I'm not dividing my podcast attention, but that's okay.
You love this podcast so much. The people do want like the OG hour, brought to you by.
I would listen to that
English.
so hard. Are you kidding me?
The best
I'd
sponsor
be
ever.
First subscriber.
Old English, High Gravity 40s is going to be the sponsor. Oh, it'd be perfect.
Oh, marketing opportunities are endless.
Depends. Yeah, man, how you doing? Joe writes for purplePTSD.com. He also writes for the Sports Post, but we won't get into that based on predictions made in an article over there. But outside of that, how you doing, man?
I'm good until my introduction right now.
You were good.
Wait, that's just hit after hit after hit to your self-esteem, huh?
Yes, I'm gonna soldier through it though, just for you, Joe.
Well, that's representative of the team. I feel like they build up your self-esteem and then they tear it down. And right now we're in the build-up phase. Some of us. There's been some breaking news that's taken down my mood a little bit that we'll get into in a few seconds. Courtesy of Mr. Luke Braun, who is always tapped into the Vikings zeitgeist and just broke some news for us a couple seconds ago.
I actually just spend a lot of time on Twitter when I probably should be working instead.
That's the same thing. The Vikings zeitgeist Twitter.
Yeah.
Same.
I was trying to dress it up for your employer, but
my employer's not listening to this.
Well, they're missing out. The best content on the internet. Luke writes.
Actually, I'm directly employed by a Packers fan.
Oh, okay.
Oh no.
Well, tell them like Packer fans always do. Tell them that there's room on the Vikings bandwagon now that theirs is busted. So.
I'm working on it. On it. He's a bigger baseball guy. It's fine.
Luke writes for purplePTSD.com. He also co-hosts the Pocket Protectors podcast, which is an amazing podcast. Yeah, man. How's your bye week been?
Been fine. I was disappointed in the week of football. Usually the bye week is fun. I get to flip on Red Zone and just have it on the whole day, but all the games sucked until the end.
Yeah, I feel like, not to delve into things we talked about before the show, but I feel like I'm the opposite of King Midas. Everything I touch turns to rust, and getting to the NFL, I felt like, as a possible career choice and a dream to follow, that this is the most popular thing in the United States, and it'll be something that'll be consistently popular for the next X amount of years. And it feels like, and this obviously wasn't on the agenda, so it's an amazing way to start the show, but it feels like the NFL's lost a lot of its luster. I mean, looking at how many people went to or didn't go to the 49ers Cardinals game, there was a handful of people in the stands at kickoff. It seems like
two bad teams.
Yeah, if it's that or if it's some of it's the anthem protest, but yeah, it definitely feels like the NFL and the injuries don't help, obviously, and that's part of the too bad team thing. But yeah, it seems like definitely the NFL's lost a little of its luster. But
I can't totally go along with that. I mean, I know that I've heard plenty of people, my own experience saying that they're going to not watch the NFL anymore because of the anthem thing. And I was looking on a Packers site, as I always do when they lose, to see how the wailing and gnashing of teeth. And one guy was.
I do that too. It's very fun.
One guy was talking about how he had stopped watching the Packers because of because they knelt during the anthem, and then he proceeded to say, "But when I do turn in," and he gives us an in-depth analysis of the game on Monday night. So you gave it up, but then you watched anyway.
Thank you.
So
That's the perfect way to put it too, because the reason I brought that up too is because we get so much of that in our the comment section on our Facebook feed especially, and it's like, but or even on the site itself, and it's like, if you've gotten this far that you're on the Purple PTSD Facebook page, you're obviously still paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, you're deep into the Vikings.
Like, how far do you have
coverage world
to get to us? Christ. So yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, they're begrudgingly watching it while claiming not to watch it, I guess. But beyond that, the big news that's dominated everything for the past few weeks obviously has been the quarterback situation for the Vikings, and we were going to initially talk about the fact that all the reports is that Teddy's going to be activated to the 53-man roster tomorrow, but Luke just saw something.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
Literally 10 minutes before we started recording, Chris Mortensen tweeted that Sam had his knee scoped today on Tuesday. Still no decision officially yet on IR as of this recording, but he went to visit James Andrews and got a knee scope, and that means that he's going to be out for at least a couple more weeks, if not completely just to IR at this point, which might happen when Teddy Bridgewater hits the active roster on Wednesday, which is almost certainly going to happen because now
it all depends on what they did, and it could possibly, as Luke is intimating, it could make a decision easy for the Vikings. They could roster Teddy and IR Bradford and hang on to Slaughter and roll with those three quarterbacks, So I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but it seems easier to do that now and just say, shut her down, Sam, get healthy, and come back next year, and we'll see.
I believe Jeremiah Searles has a pretty bad knee injury too, and he could also be an IR candidate, and then they just roll with four quarterbacks for the time being, and just let Sam Bradford. Well, he went down in the Ravens game, and it was a knee thing, and he was a non-participant all the way leading up to the Browns game, and we haven't seen any practice reports since because of the bye and everything, but it seemed like it was a fairly severe injury. And also, he might have lost his depth chart position to Isadora anyways, which makes it easier to put him on IR, and sometimes they use IR as kind of a wishy-washy way to cut a player.
I thought you were going to say he had lost his depth perception, which would have explained some of his play.
Oh.
Yeah, but there's so much. It's such a can of worms there, because you look at it and you say, well, if Bradford could come back in 4 to 6 weeks, maybe they keep him, dependent on how confident they are in Teddy's health.
Right. Right.
And I don't know if there's been any reports. I know he's bulked up a lot, and that the team has said that they're happy with what he's been doing in practice. I think some people expected him to start like right away when they brought him back, which wasn't realistic. So I think there's like an aura out there that maybe Teddy isn't as healthy as the team thought he was going to be or something. But it is if they were to put Sam on IR, if he was able to come back in 4 to 6 weeks and bring the team into the playoffs, that could be sort of like a New England-esque gamble on Teddy's health. Granted, they still have Case Keenum, but the
who?
Yeah, the guy that gets lost. He must feel so unappreciated.
The one that has 5 wins for the Vikings this year, and nobody even talks about him, but he's going to be starting on Sunday.
Yeah, nobody ever talks about him.
Nope. Ask Luke.
Not a single time. I will say this, if you think that you have a chance to upgrade the quarterback position, even if there's a little bit of mystery surrounding Teddy Bridgewater, it's a costless move to play him because you can hook him right away just like you did with Bradford and still have enough Keenum to, come in and finish out the game and put up a respectable effort. But I think, if the only mystery surrounding Teddy Bridgewater is how he goes at game speed, right? They know how he can move. They know how he can practice. They know how, they know about as much medically as they can possibly know without opening his knee right back up.
And how he takes that first hit, second hit, third hit.
Can he protect himself?
Right, can he protect himself? And if the only way to find that out is put him in at game speed, then you got to do it. You cannot just sit there and let him be enshrouded in mystery, gathering more and more rust.
Totally agree that, especially with contract looming next year, and as you were saying, Joe, there was some mystery about whether he was healthy or not. I mean, ultimately, you can't strengthen the knee joint yet. You repair it, and it is what it is, but you can strengthen the muscles around it to protect it a little bit. But ultimately, you got what the good Lord gave you there, and we'll see what happens. It's a matter of him being able to protect himself at game speed, like Luke says, and if he can, then you got to roll with him, and he's just like any other player then that could get injured.
Right. There's a certain point where. Yeah, there's a certain point where it doesn't matter how many surgeries you have or have not had. Somebody rolls up on your leg weird, you're just going to tear it.
Right. So it's weird having the top two quarterbacks in their of the four that they have here. The ones, either one of them would be the most preferable, and both of them are shrouded in mystery a bit. You just don't know how they're going to come out of whatever they're coming out of yet, and the Vikings need to find out. They need to find this out in order to make decisions going forward.
And find it out quick.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but it's not the most apt time to bring back a rusty quarterback either, with the schedule getting difficult here. Or at least.
But when does it get easier? When do you wait? Like, you can't wait for like an easy.
And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it would have been nice to have them maybe before the bye. But that's
But the bye is the best time to make this. It's the easiest time to make a switch is when you have all this bye time to examine it and do it, and the momentum. If there was any momentum, you kind of lose it when you take a week off. This is the time to do it, not when you're reeling after a bad loss.
Or, the way they did it during the Bears game, just with Teddy instead of Bradford.
And if that happens, that happens. But you just have to see this team is clearly so good around its quarterback, and we saw that with Sam Bradford, lighting up what we now know to be a pretty good Saints team. This team can be so good if they have better than replacement level at quarterback, which is pretty much what Case Keenum is playing at right now. And if you have a chance to get that and you leave him on the bench because you're worried he might have a bad half, or you're worried that he maybe will not be at full health, but he could still be at full, because you're afraid of the answer to that question. You're gonna guarantee play. I can't deal with it. And that wasn't directed at you. That was just me ranting about the people who are so deathly afraid of starting a bad quarterback. They instead will decide to start a bad quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying that I think he should ride the bench because of uncertainty. I mean, I've been on the same side as you in regards to the Case Keenum thing and how I'd rather, granted I am an unabashed Bradford guy, but I also am basically saying that Teddy is better than Keenum.
I think we just
by every measurable metric.
Joe, I think we discovered a new segment for the podcast called Get Luke Going, so kind of a rip off of
Get Me Heated.
Yes.
Well, I don't blame him, man. He took a lot of heat for his article, and in your defense, because I know a lot of writers have learned the hard way, myself especially, not to engage with the people who are tearing down their article, but it did seem like a lot of people weren't, which is a huge surprise, I'm sure, to everyone here, weren't reading what you were saying, and instead were just responding to the headline, and everything you said was backed up by numbers and gifs and was logical, and you were basically just saying, Teddy's better at what Keenum does. Teddy's just better at it, and he's more dynamic.
Luke, I still invite those people to continue to comment on articles because get into the discussion. I don't care if I think you're wrong. I actually was very happy that article got as much discussion around it as it did, even if most of it disagreed with me.
Do you think that Keenum can elevate his game in any way? I mean, he's got this.
I think he has.
I think
as far as it'll go.
I think it's like a kid standing on his tiptoes right now. He's got a little taller than he usually is, and it's not going to last.
All right. Well, then we need to see if that's true, and if that's I'm not gonna I'm not going to say he can't, but if that's true, then the Vikings have to see what they have in these other two guys. They just as soon as possible.
The thing I will play devil's advocate. The thing that people are throwing in response to Luke's article and things that I've said as well is Keenum's number X in rankings of quarterbacks. I think it was number 5 in some ranking. I don't know what it was. His completion percentage is nearly 64%. His touchdown to interception is 7-2. And so they're looking at those stats, but I don't think they're looking at like how the game is flowing and how things work, and the fact that it does take him and I don't know how to compare those two, that it does take this offense a long time to get going, an entire half the last 2 weeks, but at the same time somehow he's completing all these passes. But it doesn't feel that way when you're watching the first half of the game. It just feels like the offense is disjointed.
He's ranking very well in a lot of advanced stats, and I think a big part of that, and this is a fair assessment, a huge part of that is his ability to avoid sacks, especially when under pressure, and stuff like ESPN's QBR, which has him 7th right now, is taking the fact that he's under pressure and then not taking a sack and then even making it a successful play. Gives him a really good score by that, and that's huge. That's properly evaluating those very good plays. I did, as part of that Case Keenum article, I did just an examination of how good you are at preventing pressures from turning into sacks, and Case Keenum's the best in the league in that, and it's actually not close. So that is fair, and he is doing that very, very well, which is why he's ranking well in some of those advanced statistics. He's also getting bailed out by incredible catch radiuses of Thielen and Diggs.
Yeah.
And he's getting decent protection, as I wrote in an article.
And I will say that Sam did on Monday night opening game as well. There was a couple, 2 to 3 catches that night that he was not on right spot. And I know Thielen had one, maybe 2, and I think Diggs had one as well that were.
Yeah, I think I know what you're thinking about.
Yeah, he was. It
was those passes that to Thielen, but they were on his fingertips, but he still was able to pick up some yards after the catch, because they were just the type where he was running and then he had to reach so far out that he kind of started,
yeah, it was the best direction to miss.
I don't know how you prioritize quarterback deep analytics you're talking to, but that's got to be a big one. And the two guys that we're talking about outside of Case, I certainly don't want Teddy trying to make plays with his legs unless he can, and I know Bradford can't. So that is really huge in Case Keenum's defense, I think.
It is an element of our game that we did not have last year, which is really weird to say, because in pretty much all measurements, career-wise, there's really never a situation where you would take Case Keenum over Sam Bradford, except for right now for that reason.
I do feel like there was something lost there in regards to just the fact that because Bradford is immobile doesn't mean that he eats the ball either. He can get rid of the ball Tom Brady.
Yeah, he just checks it down instead of runs away.
Yeah, or throws it away.
Which is I guess, in terms of value added and yards gained, a check down usually can get 3, and that's better than a throwaway. So.
Yeah. So I don't know. I went out on a ledge this week and said that I had this theory that I hadn't read anywhere was if Bradford had arthritis, they would have scoped him by now. So I'm just a little despondent by the news, but another thing before we hop into the offensive line stuff that you had a brilliant segue to that we didn't pick up on, Luke, is the news, and you guys can explain this better than me because you have a better understanding of it, but Kyle Sloter had mentioned something about the rumor, I guess, that multiple teams tried to trade for him before the trade deadline, and I guess I find that interesting because what do they see in him maybe that I'm not seeing, or should I be?
I think he had a strong preseason. Why
was he available then?
Because the Broncos have no idea how to evaluate quarterbacks.
Apparently.
And B, they had a logjam at the position. They had too many on their roster and they couldn't keep them. They had Simeon and Lynch, and then I think they just went with Simeon and Lynch for a while, and then when Lynch got hurt, they picked up Brock Osweiler or something like that.
They regretted it as soon as a couple weeks after they let him go.
Right, and if you do have to cut Sloter when Bridgewater comes back onto the roster, there's no way he gets past the Broncos on waivers because the Broncos are desperate for something at the quarterback position, and there's a chance Sloter's actually better than the guys they have right now.
There's plenty of teams that would jump on it. Texans would probably take a look at him.
Yeah, he's young. He has a lot of the quarterback cliches. He's got the tall arm strength, prototype that coaches tend to fall in love with almost to a fault. And he's young and he had a good preseason. So I think he's on a lot of teams' radars, which that trade rumor was old news, though. That came out around the trade deadline, and I think somebody was just asking Sloter about it. That was public knowledge.
I think you're right. I think it's Thompson. Hey, Joe, if I could just, before you move off the quarterbacks, I just saw a story from on Bradford. It sounds like he had his knee cleaned up, but there was no major damage. And what they did was cleaned up some ragged cartilage and smoothed out a bone spur, and to hopefully
a bone spur. Okay,
yes, and
that's interesting.
I can speak experience there. Having walked around without an ACL for 3 years, and then I had my ACL done. And when the doctor got finished with it, she told me, she said, "This took a lot longer because you had the biggest bone spur I have ever seen." This is a surgeon who does, how many of these things. And so they had to clear that out of there before they could then go in and repair the ACL. So these are things that build up when you get bone hitting on bone, and it just, well, if they get to a size where they're really affecting your mobility, and they're very painful. It was, so it sounds like if it's just, a little trimming up and a little bone, I don't know how big the bone's for, smoothing it out, it might not be that long. So that's probably where the decision comes in. It may be like 4 weeks tops or whatever. As soon as he gets rid of the pain and if there's no structural damage, he's probably good to go. So I don't know, maybe that's good news.
To me, that's
maybe you have him. Yeah, maybe you have him, and this fun quarterback chaos can continue throughout the rest of the regular season. I'd be really excited for that. But I mean, if he could get, if that is true, and he could get healthy in 3 or 4 weeks, right, and suddenly you have him as an option going down the stretch and into the playoffs, and you can actually sit there and practice both Bridgewater and Bradford and make a honest to God based on merit decision between the two. That's a great situation for the team to be in.
Exactly, and it's in case one of them gets hurt, either one of them that you throw there.
Right, which is pretty likely because they both have now very fragile knees, and it doesn't even have anything to do with yeah, and that means that they could both go down in more non-contact practice drills.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be a great thing to have, and then we go into after the season, we go into the off season with a really, really fun quarterback situation from a viewer's perspective. It'll be really fun to watch how they handle that.
And I do really quickly, a quick aside, we mentioned some of the fan responses to our articles, and I did want to say that one of the main reasons the site existed in the first place was because I do like to debate, and I think all of us here do enjoy that as well, and we've had a weird experience.
I have to disagree with that. I don't like debating at all.
Here's why. And a lot of us have gone to Reddit to defend our articles and have felt kind of ostracized, by being run out of town for doing just that. So that a big part of the reason why the site exists in the first place is because people on Reddit were like, "Why are you arguing all the time? Get out of here, you weirdo." So yeah, we like that, and we love when people engage what we do, but we also like to make fun of it. So strap in. But
yeah, I'm very happy that if you want to comment on my article, but I will make fun of you if your take is bad.
There you go.
Both those things are true.
So yeah, oh god, I just that's really, really good news. And part of them staying healthy, I guess, is the offensive line, and I'm struggling to remember how the offensive line performed in 2015 and how they protected Teddy. I know that I think in 2014 was it that he was pressured on like 50% of his dropbacks. I don't know if it was that bad in 2015, but I guess my question is this offensive line better than what both of them were used to?
Cue Luke.
And yeah, Luke wrote an article about it, so yeah.
Yeah, this was the piece I wrote that came out on Tuesday.
And you can go rip him. He will only rip on you if your take is bad. Go ahead.
No, only if your take is bad. There's a lot of interesting ways to measure offensive line play. It's really a difficult thing to sort of lock down because you can go by pressures allowed, but that can be kind of crazy because sometimes quirks in a play design or other weird factors can cause you to give up a pressure that you didn't even really play bad on that play, which is tough. I used PFF grades because it's kind of one of the only things we have to go on, and they're fairly stable when it comes to offensive line. It's a lot easier to determine what an offensive lineman is supposed to do than like a defensive back or
less variables,
something like that. Yeah, it's there are some times when it's hard to grade like a miscommunication because it's hard to tell who was supposed to do what when somebody goes the wrong way.
Which I've heard as a defense from Zimmer in the past when he was bristling against some grades from PFF. He would say they don't know what everything that they're supposed to be doing on this. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's tough on defense too, right? Because Zimmer is asking his defenders to make like split-second reads, and that means that somebody might have done well on a play when they did something that wasn't their job or whatever. But with offensive line, usually they look exactly at who they're going to block, and then it's all very technique and it's very technical, which makes it pretty straightforward to evaluate. So I do trust that their offensive line grades. But some fun, gaudy stats. They, in 2016, between the 5 sort of main offensive linemen, which were Clemmings, Boone, Berger, Fusco, and Searles, those guys all, I think, took more than 70% of the snaps on the year. Of those 5, and 2 grades each, right, a run grade and a pass grade, so 10 grades total, only one of them topped 70, and it was Alex Boone in pass protection. This year, same measure, we have 7 that top 70. Which is a huge uptick in consistency. Obviously. We don't have any real superstars, which is fine, and we kind of knew that. Like, we knew Riley Reif wasn't like Joe Thomas or Trent Williams. Here's another funny one. Riley Reif currently has 17 pressures on the year, which puts him on pace for 34. That would tie Brandon Fusco in 2016, who was the 3rd worst. So our currently most pressure-allowing offensive lineman would tie for 3rd on last year's offensive line. And nobody is going to come close to TJ Clemmings, who gave up 58 pressures in 2016, which is disgusting.
And who may be playing left tackle this weekend.
Oh, God, please give me Everson Griffin versus TJ Clemmings. We are owed this.
That would make it all worthwhile.
I just had to go look up if Fusco is still playing, and he's playing for San Francisco. And started.
We got Willie Beavers back today.
That's
we
right.
did.
Yes.
Yeah, cut Bronson Hill, which actually means that there's I forget his name, but there is a running back currently on the 53-man roster who will probably get carries. That is not Murray or McKinnon. They signed a 3rd guy.
Yeah.
And the thing that was repeated a lot last season and then repeated in this season was that, if we could just have a mediocre offensive line, this team could be amazing, and it seems to be kind of playing out that way.
Well, they've done pretty well. I mean, I wanted to ask you this earlier, Luke, when you were talking about the pressures. I don't know how many times Case Keenum had, evaded a sack or whatever. Is he getting pressure, more pressure?
I believe he's taking a moderate amount of pressure. I don't think he's like leading the league or anything like what happened with Teddy in his season, but let me actually look that up right now. I can pull that up. But I think it's maybe on the higher end. He's getting a solid amount of pressure, above average a little, but not crazy.
So I wonder if he's jumping out 10th. Too quick, or I'm sorry.
Tied for 10th in the league for pressure percentage of qualifying quarterbacks.
Highest. 10th
highest, correct, yes. 10th most pressured. The most pressured was Deshaun Watson, RIP.
So how does that inform him? He does a good job of getting out of, sacks.
It means he's really good at preventing it from turning into sacks. The problem is on those pressured plays, his stats are not very good. He hasn't been able to produce when under pressure, so it's been a lot of he avoided a sack but then threw the ball away, or avoided a sack but then threw a bad incompletion or whatever.
And the last time we saw Teddy, he was good at that, correct?
He was unbelievable at that. I guess, put it this way, it's really good that Case Keenum is better at he's probably better at avoiding pressure than Teddy Bridgewater is. He's better at taking that pressure and making it not turn into a sack. But Teddy Bridgewater is better at taking that pressure and turning it into a positive play that keeps the offense on schedule, which is ultimately more important and a better aggregate of if you're good at this.
And Sam's better at checking down?
I have no idea. I haven't looked at Sam Bradford's stats in a long time because he doesn't exist.
Joe, just kidding.
Oh, you know what I mean. I mean, it doesn't mean that he takes a hit on every play, I guess is my point.
Last year, Sam had to check down. I mean,
he got.
There's no choice. I would love to have the New Orleans Saints Sam Bradford playing for this team. Don't get me wrong, but
I'm telling you, that's the way it's gonna shake down. He's gonna come back.
Gonna have Sam Bradford on his first playoff team.
You know, he's gonna win the Super Bowl in home, and then he's gonna have to retire because his knee will fall apart.
He could then come on Scold Home or Scold Folks Home or what is it?
Scold Folks Home?
Yeah, he'd be a perfect person. He'd be a Ring of Honor for the Packers game last year and for exactly on his knee scooter. And we talked about Griffin going up against Clemmings, and I briefly just wanted to talk about the season that he's having. I know that Jonathan Kinsley, who is now officially a writer for Purple PTSD, hooray, thanks, Luke. That sounded sarcastic, but it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, really excited to have him.
He's
a great content creator.
Yeah, and he wrote a great piece about Thielen also that we're going to touch on here, and how great he's playing versus the rest of the league. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on the amazing season that Griffin's having. I mean, he's tied for all sorts of for NFL records right now. I think he's got tied for second for the longest streak of sacks. It's 9 games in a row now, which means he's had a sack every single game this year, which obviously isn't breaking news or anything, but he's about 12, so he has 10 sacks with 8 games to go. He is 12 off of the team record, which is Jared Allen at 22, obviously. I didn't need a formula for that. See how smart I am. And he's 12 and a half off of Strahan's quote-unquote record.
He is one off the current NFL lead, however. He's behind a sack behind. I don't know who the heck it is. I can't remember.
Marcus Lawrence, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
He's DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be the guy that beats Everson Griffin for the Defensive Player of the Year.
And do you think, in that regard too, Defensive Player of the Year, do you think that because our defense is so stacked, that kind of hurts Griffin's chances a little bit because the line is so good and it's less of an individual effort?
I don't think so.
The Jim Marshall effect.
Right. I mean, they were saying that, I think I maybe mentioned this last week, that some people talking about the reason why Danielle Hunter hasn't got as many is because he's been pushing him Everson's way, doing his job, staying in his lane, doing what have you. So I think it's all part of it. But the thing that, a couple of things concern me a little bit, just a little bit about Griffin, and it all happened in the last game he played was when he did get that injury at the end. He said 2 weeks to rest it up, so he probably should be fine. I'm sure it was nothing, so they said. Who knows if that slows him down. But the other thing was he was really concerned about getting that sack at the end of the game. Now, granted, they were blowing out Cleveland, and I just, Everson's a great guy, wonderful to talk to. He's definitely a team player, but you hate hearing anybody say, "Oh God, I had to get that sack," and that was some of the quotes after the game. I just go, "Come on, Everson, that's not the end all be all here. We want something else." So, but that's it. That's
that guy. I forget who the NBA player was who put up that rebound for himself just to get a double-double or a triple-double a couple years ago. I forget who that was, but that was.
I remember it did happen. You're right.
That's legendary.
Yeah.
So
and Griffin too, I think, is on pace to break the record or owns the record for the most egregious offsides in a game. Okay. Every game streak since he always hops offline, which is part of it.
But he's got his own get off guy. He's got his own get off coach. I asked him about that a couple weeks ago. I said, how do you do that? Well, you're right up to the edge. You always, and sometimes you're not getting it. I just go talk to my get off guy. He teaches me, I knew that. I had no idea there was such a thing, such a coach in the league as a get off guy. But there it is.
And Hollywood get off guy means something really different.
He works next to the fluffer. And then just to touch on Jonathan's article about Thielen and also the records that he's breaking, which aren't as snazzy but are still worth mentioning. If things keep going the way they are, and I wrote an article about this, so I'm just forcing an article I wrote into this, since I never do that because most of my articles are just me crying about bitcoins. But I
ding,
think
ding, we're gonna go ding every time it's mentioned. That's twice.
Oh,
okay.
get used to it.
I'm gonna take a point away from you in the season-long contest every time you mention Bitcoin.
It's worth it. He'll end up as the 10th undrafted player ever with 90 catches and the 6th ever with 1,200 yards, which is pretty cool for him. I just love Thielen.
That's really cool. Oh, that's an awesome stat.
Isn't it? Like,
yes and no. Yes and no. I think it's a great stat. I want it's my personal crusade to stop putting that label on him.
Undrafted?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. But it is fun,
I like doing it because I think it motivates him.
Right,
so I feel personally responsible when he does things because I feel like I'm motivating him.
I just remember the first few years talking to him, when he was on the practice squad, oh, God, yeah, I told him I'm from Mankato and blah, blah, blah. We kind of talked about it. And then after I brought it up a couple times, he got this look in his eyes as he started progressing. It was almost like, don't be bringing that up anymore. That I was vision too, he didn't come out and say he was not a jerk anyway, answer my questions, but all of a sudden you just get this vibe. It's like, okay, and now look at this guy. He's one of the best in the league, Joe, right? That's what the article's about, showing him. So he's clearly one of the best ever as an undrafted player. We got the Vikings also had an undrafted player in the Hall of Fame in John
Randall.
So.
And now we have the sequel to John Randall.
And I shouldn't complain about it too much because I love the fact that because I'm not as deep diver of a draft as other people are, and I just love how it's not an exact science. So I love to see when things like this happen, and especially when it's a Minnesota guy and great guy like Adam Thielen. So that's awesome.
And he took a long time to develop and improve.
I was just going to say, definition of a late bloomer.
Yeah, like when he came out of the draft, he didn't get drafted for a reason, and he didn't make the team, and he went off, to practice squads, and he kind of bounced around the league a little bit, and then he snuck onto the roster. And I even remember going into last year, I think I actually predicted in my roster prediction that he would get cut in favor of some other random person.
Last year?
Going into last year.
Thank you.
Because he hadn't done anything.
He
was just a kind of random depth guy, and then he came out and over the 2016 season, he surged, and it's so good to watch him grow up and become such a polished route runner, and even at 30, still has such great athleticism. His catch radius is absurd, and he's such a great inaccuracy eraser. It's amazing to see the wide receiver he's become. I think there's an argument to be made that he's a top 10 player in the league at the position.
And he got a $500 scholarship.
I was just going to say, he wasn't even appreciated at Mankato.
No.
Yeah. Even at 30, he is bringing, it seems like every season he's got a new aspect to his game, and he's always improving, which is awesome.
He's 30?
I didn't know that. I'm just going off of what Luke said.
Is he 30 years old?
I thought he was.
I thought he was.
Or is he 26 and I'm thinking of somebody else?
I thought he was 27.
He can't be that. He's probably 27, 20.
Oh, he's 27. Yeah, no, I'm way wrong.
Ooh, I was right.
It scared me for a minute there.
I don't know who I was thinking of. Maybe I was thinking Sendejo or something. I don't know. The other undrafted free agent guy. I don't know. I was wrong. My bad.
Hearing Luke say that, though, Joe, I know you know where I'm going with that. Because last season I predicted that Mobo would take his roster spot, and
Yes, he did.
No one
I think I was there too.
No one holds that against me.
Joe.
No one holds that against me.
Joe.
More than me. I bring it up more than. Well, no one brings it up. I do, but
that's the point I want to make. Is you said he's taken, and rightfully so. It's taken him a while to develop, but clearly Zimmer and Spielman and whoever saw something in him to keep him around this long.
Yeah. They deserve.
Cost much. Didn't cost much, and a guy like that can languish on the practice squad for a couple years before someone spots him. But boy, now, he would be. People would be falling all over the place to get a guy like that on their team.
Definitely, he's better than Eric Decker. Who would have thought that would ever happen? And we're gonna need him. Talk about.
Can I real quick before we move on to the Redskins? Can I real quick throw in a little bit on Everson Griffin, because we just kind of talked about his injury and stuff and not how good he is.
Yeah.
Because from a pass rushing perspective, he has 35 pressures on the year, which is tied for 7th. He's had more snaps and stuff, I think, in terms of actual, like, per snap. It's more like 14th or something. But either way, he's like a top 10, top 15 defensive end in terms of those advanced stats. But he's been able to chase him down and turn him into, like, a gaudy number of sacks. And I think to break the record, he would probably need to put together, like, one of those 4 or 5 sack, take over the game kind of games.
Yeah.
Which I think he has that in him. I think it's possible, but there's a little bit more variance involved with that to like truly prognosticate it one way or the other.
Yep.
So I think it's in the cards. I think the sack record is there if he can pull one of those like crazy games together, but otherwise he has to average like a sack and a half a game, which is pretty tough to do.
Well, there's 3 guys there. One is at 11, one at 10.5, and then Griffin at 10. So there's some people that are vying for it.
Yeah. Not only do you have to get to the quarterback, but you have to beat Danielle Hunter to the quarterback, which sometimes doesn't happen.
Or you end up with a half a sack where you would have gotten a full sack because he's there
right,
too.
Or the unblocked blitzer because Zimmer's defenses have been giving these young quarterbacks hits in terms of protection calls.
Yeah, he's a beast, 100% real. And we're gonna get into the Redskins game, but that kind of ties into another topic that we had on the agenda, which is Bitcoins. I'm kidding.
Jesus.
No, but we wanted to touch on the second half of the season, the strength of schedule. I know there's been a lot of people saying this is a test, the test part of the season, or this is going to show how good the Vikings really are because we've been beating up on bad and injured teams. And I do feel like, a loss or 2 here, and a lot of those Case Keenum bandwagoners are going to just completely, seppuku themselves. But looking at the second half, I guess the best way to posit it is obviously we talked about this off the air, but when it comes to our competition in the NFC and playoff seeding and everything, needing to basically win the division to get in, it was the conclusion we got to, and the fact that, granted we're 2 games in front of the Lions, but they have a crazy easy schedule the rest of the way, which is kind of disheartening since we're getting into the rough part of our schedule. So, yeah, what were your guys' I guess I just took every single talking point and vomited it out in about 10 seconds, but what were your guys' thoughts on, not just, before we get into the Redskins game a little bit more in depth, just that second half and the Lions especially?
Ultimately, I agree with your assessment. The Lions have an easy schedule. The Vikings have a much tougher one than they had in the first half. But I a number of years ago, I used to cry about the schedule, and I finally just said to myself, you know what? You don't care about the regular season. You care about the playoffs. If you want to beat the best, you got to play the best. So you better test yourself against the tougher teams as you go through November and December, and then you're going to find out if you're really, ready to do that. You can get hurt playing an easy team as well as you can get hurt as playing a tough team. So you might as well be tested as you get into November and December and play those tough teams. If they don't, I know you got to get into the dance to do anything, but if you can't beat teams like Washington and Atlanta, Atlanta won the Super Bowl last year. If you can't beat teams like who else we got? You certainly can't beat teams like the Packers now, but Los Angeles. That's going to be a great test. It's a huge test for this team. They got them at home, which I really like, and they're supposed to road warriors. So you really get to find out what your team is, and that's so bring it on, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Well,
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree because if you can't beat teams like the Falcons and the Panthers and the Lions, you probably don't deserve to be in the playoffs. So,
right.
Bring them on. Let's go.
I guess I would just say that at this point I'll just take whatever. If by some miracle a good team like a 15-1 Packers loses in the first round and we weasel our way into a championship by beating a team that shouldn't be there in the first place, I'll take that too.
Certain.
I will say
I'll still be blackout drunk at that parade.
I will say in terms of playoff position, and the Lions, that Thanksgiving game, I think before the show we were talking about this, it feels like that's a playoff game.
Absolutely.
That's more the case for the Lions than the Vikings, because right now the Vikings at 6-2 have they have some losses to give. They can blow some games and still be in it. They can take a couple losses. At 4-4, the Lions don't have that luxury, and if they lose to the Vikings and lose out on that tiebreaker, that means that they pretty much have to go, 7-1 or 6-2 through that stretch, which it is a lot of easy teams, but football is fluky, and stringing together 7 wins for a team like the Lions that isn't that great is going to be pretty tough. But the rest of the NFC scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
You've got the Rams and the Seahawks are both looking like, they should be playoff teams. The Eagles and the Cowboys are the same. That eats up your wild card spots, and we haven't even talked about the Redskins, the Falcons, the Panthers. The Vikings are going to have chance.
Didn't we see what the Seahawks for who they are this past weekend though? When they had that
Seahawks are always late bloomers. They do this to us every year. They always start off slow.
Still got that offensive line that they brought in a left tackle that helped, but they're still a bulky, front line protecting,
and they still have Blair Walsh.
Yeah. The good thing is I think both of those teams are sitting at 5-3 right now, the Cowboys and the Seahawks, and we're sitting a game ahead of them, and we don't play them directly. So, that means that we have a little bit of space to give with those teams and maybe sneaking in on a wild card if we do end up getting swept by the Lions, which likely leads to a division loss. The whole NFC picture though is just very crowded, and I think that there's a very good chance that you see a 10-6 team and or just a very good team that doesn't make the playoffs because of the way the conference shook out. And because of how bad the AFC is, it's loading all of the wins into the NFC. So you might see a situation like the Bears 10-6 team that didn't make the playoffs, or I think it happened a couple other times.
11-5 Patriots didn't make it the year that
was
Brady
amazing.
was out.
That was the weirdest year.
Yeah. And I think this is a good testament, too, about, looking at the strength of schedule before the season and how worthless that is, because a lot of these teams didn't strike any fear in the hearts of anyone, and, like the Rams is the team that I'm thinking of, especially.
The biggest surprise.
Yeah, and so you got to kind of wait till this point in the season to see, like, really what your strength of schedule was or is going to be. But speaking of that, we're going to Washington to play the Redskins this week, and they're always a team that we seem to play on a fairly regular basis, and we always seem to struggle against them.
In Washington,
that field is cursed. AP got injured there. I lost my Bitcoins there.
Jesus.
Hey, I told you. I'm gonna
The Vikings have lost the last 2 in Washington, but they've won the last 2 games here against them. So in the last 4 times, that's.
And that team's a mess. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing with Kirk Cousins.
They have a very injured front line. Their offensive line is, their left tackle's been suspended, and that's why we could see T.J. Clemmings if their backup doesn't come back from
speaking of keys to the game,
core muscle. And so the rest of their line's hurt and injured, and they're starting to come back, but they won a huge game against the Seahawks this weekend, and they have another quality win on their schedule. It escapes me at the moment, but they've beaten Oakland in Washington, and they beat another tough team on the road. I can't even think of who it is.
And I didn't mean they were mess on. They're winning despite front office shenanigans, I guess, which is kind of the story with their ownership and Daniel Snyder / Daniel Stern from Home Alone. That's an inside joke for Joe.
They took out the Rams.
Yeah,
that's what it was. They beat the Rams. Yeah.
So they scare me, and I feel like this is going to be the week to get into the keys to the game. The only thing I wanted to throw out there really was that I don't really think that this is the type of team that we're going to be able to come out and kind of shit the bed the first half against. I think we need to put up some points. I think our defense, obviously needs to play at least within the scope of being down a couple points or with the lead, so we can have Everson Griffin and Hunter kind of.
They don't have a real good rush. They don't have a real good running game. Their passing game is pretty decent, but their running game is just.
They have that Chris Thompson who seems to get like 5 carries a game and 600 yards per game.
They have really good running backs, but not very good blocking, and I feel like the Vikings have the kind of defense that can stymie that pretty well.
That's my only fear is that dude seems to get a lot of yards from in the passing game more so than anything. He's on my fantasy team, and I never start him because you don't expect him to keep this up. But pretty much every game except for one or two, he's had like 20 points because he just seems to score a lot of touchdowns and get a lot of big plays in the passing game especially. I just feel like Case Keenum needs to come out and kind of show maybe some of his bandwagoners that they're right and put up some points on the first drive and set the tone for the game,
He'll have Teddy looking over his shoulder, so now he's got it.
Yeah, maybe that'll help him. Maybe that'll hurt him. I don't know. He looked horrible at training camp when that was the dynamic, so I'm a little worried about that. But what do you guys think are kind of the keys to the game? I do think that obviously the TJ Clemmings thing would be huge. I mean, that's the biggest determining factor.
Yeah,
sure.
I was just looking up that they have a guy, Ty Nishik, I can't say his last name.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I didn't say it.
Yeah, they have a backup to Trent Williams who also has been hurt, who was active in the Seahawks game, but just they didn't play. He was healthy enough to be a backup, but they played TJ Clemmings instead, so it seems like that puts him on a trajectory to play in this game. So I think it's doubtful that we see TJ Clemmings, which is kind of a bummer. I think this game is going to be fairly evenly matched and grindy, kind of.
Yep.
It'll be grindy in the way the Ravens game was, but it won't be as easy to win as the Ravens game. The Ravens offense has a lot of, or the Redskins offense has a lot of issues. Kirk Cousins has not played as well and has been bailed out by his surrounding talent a little bit. Their offensive line is an issue. They haven't been able to get too much of a run game going.
Their stud tight end is out. Well, was out last week, and it's kind of
How was what's his face doing? Pryor? Nothing.
He's been quiet. Quiet. They should have had this like crazy stable of weapons that's been underperforming a little bit, but that still worries me, right? Because like a guy like Josh Doxson could eat up Trey Waynes, or Jamison Crowder could eat up Trey Waynes, and that they could move the ball that way. I don't see them moving the ball quite a bit, but I do see them at least having a functional offense, which is better than what we've played the last two games. On the other side of the ball, I could see kind of a similar tone. I don't think we're going to get completely shut down, but their defense is very good. Their secondary is very good, and I'm worried about their secondary being able to create turnovers off of low-velocity Case Keenum passes. I think these teams are fairly evenly matched. I think these are two pretty close teams in terms of, especially if we're going to have Case Keenum at quarterback, and we don't get a boom from a better QB.
And we are going to have Case Keenum is the word, right?
Vikings opened as the slight favorite, though, just for what.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by the fact that the Vikings opened as a slight favorite. I think that these are even teams on a neutral location. It's going to be tough at FedEx Field, and I think we have to win the turnover battle or win off of a good punt return or some other kind of stuff to go on to take this game. But make no mistake, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think it's a huge game. It sets up the rest of the second half of the season because after that you get the Rams and Detroit right on the heels of that. And who knows if Atlanta, the game after that, is they start getting their act together. So this is a huge game for the Vikings. They have to win these next three, and I think if they do, they set themselves up really well for the rest of the season. But it starts with this one, and I was saying I think it's really comes down to the defense. It's going to be more of Case Keenum the way he has. Hopefully he starts out like
oh my.
Joe was suggesting. Joe Lee, he must have not liked that more Case Keenum, but
no, did I cut out?
No, there was a.
Oh, I heard a truck.
Oh yeah, I'm standing in traffic.
Okay, and hopefully they start out big. I think it's really important, like Joe was saying earlier, to start out with some points and not limp through the first half and figure out what the heck's going on and scramble to try to win. So it's going to be another big game from the defense. I think they can shut them down. I don't think that Washington offense is that dynamic that it presents any problems. But it's going to be a tough, grind 'em out game. I agree. And are we giving our predictions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, you won last week, but I'll go first anyway, so you can adjust. But since I do have a lead, but I'm thinking that 24-17 Vikings, and
ooh.
I
One score
hope
game.
that's what happens.
We have reached game 9, and Joe Oberle still has not predicted a Vikings loss.
Yay.
6-2, baby.
You gotta. Yeah, what is the? I know I asked you, Luke, if you could keep track of this, because I figured I'm gonna get decimated in terms of just overall points. But from a week-to-week basis, what is it? 3 and.
Let me look
3
here.
and 5.
See
2,
here. 1,
2 and
2,
6.
3, 4, 5. 6, 1 and 1 in favor of Oberle. Oh no, I'm sorry. 6. I'm sorry. 5, 2 and 1. 5, 2 and 1.
Ugh. Oh, I regret asking that question.
The only games you've won, Joe Johnson, are the Lions game. Oberle predicted 27-23 Vikings, and it ended up being 14-7.
And the Browns game.
And the Browns game, you won by 2.
And then we tied.
Because of a late garbage touchdown or field goal.
I'll take it. Now that it's hard because I'll just be genuine. I guess my prediction is pretty close to what you just predicted, Joe. I feel like the Price is Right fan in me wants to go low or high just to make up some ground, but I don't see this Vikings offense really putting up that many points. I know that the last few weeks I've been thinking that, we've had a down week for Case Keenum, then we're going to have an up week and he's going to light things up. I don't really see that coming from him anymore. I feel like the variance that I was relying on is more of a game-to-game thing where he plays bad in a certain quarter or a certain half and then plays well and negates the bad first half or whatever. So really I'm thinking this is going to end up being a 20 to 17 Vikings win. So pretty close actually to what you just said, but it seems like with these tough opponents, this is going to be defensive battles and it's going to be close games, and that's really just awful for my blood pressure. But I think we'll win this one. It'll just be close. It might come down to Kai Forbath doing a walk-off, which would be amazing for him because he's had a great season outside of his extra point stuff, and so
he makes the more valuable kicks. So.
Yeah, those extra points. We talked about it on the Pocket Protectors podcast, which I recorded just before this. There's a special teams article coming out on PFF this week that will show that the Vikings have the number 1 special teams in terms of expected points. A huge reason for that is the biggest problem is only worth 1 point every time it happens.
Yeah. And it's nice to... I did mention this before, but I'm really loving this Blair Walsh-Seattle situation.
That was beautiful.
Oh, they're sticking by him, and he's using the same platitudes he used here, and whatever. But
I am my fantasy team.
Is he?
I have him on my fantasy team, and I've looked to see if there's any way to replace him. There's really not much out there, so I might have to.
Really?
It's sort of like how the league is in general.
Well, 16-team league, so it gets a little bit.
It gets a little crowded.
I'm
going to go...
What's your prediction, man?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really hard game. I think this is, again, like I said, evenly matched team. We're on the road. We are playing... We're worse than they are at the quarterback position, as much as I don't really believe in Kirk Cousins. I think he's better than Case Keenum. I think that coming away from this 4-game, all this momentum we feel like we have, this feels like we are just ripe to completely fall apart.
Little rust coming out of the bye.
A little rust coming off the bye. All of this momentum and hot hand stuff doesn't make a lot of sense coming out of a bye because they didn't even practice or anything. They kind of lost all of that. Any sort of momentum they felt like they had, I feel like they lost.
They're not practicing until tomorrow this week.
Against
seems weird.
They usually start on Wednesdays, don't they? Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Well,
yes.
then,
yeah, Tuesday's a day off. But it feels like Case Keenum has gotten away with 3 bad games in a row because the team around him has won in spite of it, and I don't think he gets away with it this time. So I think my bold prediction is going to be that Keenum is going to get benched in this game. And I think it's going to.
Oh, you Teddy.
I don't know if it's. Yeah, I don't think it happens because I love Teddy so much. I do, but I don't think that's going to have much to do with the decision. I think Keenum's going to give away a couple turnovers, and I think we all know how the team feels about it. We all know how Mike Zimmer feels about Teddy. He gushes every time he gets on the podium. I don't think it's going to take much. I don't think it's going to take much from Case Keenum to get that quick hook. And I think that, he's gotten away with murder the last few weeks, and I think this is when, he throws a couple interceptions, and I think that'll be enough for Mike Zimmer to bench him. And then I think that'll happen, and it'll be a little too late to bring the game back, but Teddy will play well, but I am calling it a close, disappointing Vikings loss.
I was going to say, do you think Teddy comes in and saves the day?
Not that much of a story.
Just checking here real quick, Joe.
Yeah.
Just curious, Luke, how many times have you predicted a Vikings loss?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
5 of them. I've only been correct once.
So much.
Just saying.
No, I was gonna say that it seems like every time the announcers talk about what the coaching staff says about Keenum, it's the first thing they say is, well, he hasn't given the game away or he hasn't thrown a lot of picks. So they're not saying like things that he's done positively. They're just bringing up things that he hasn't done negatively. So if he starts doing those
matters.
things,
not throwing picks does help, and it really makes your stats all very good. But you can tell watching him that those picks are going to come around. They're going to start happening.
And he's gotten away with some things he never should have had. Yeah,
I just feel like if that's the stance they have with him, if he does start doing that, obviously like you said, the hook's going to come out pretty quickly.
Wonder how they talk to him each week. Because every time he comes out on Wednesdays and talks to the media, it's I'm just practicing like I'm going to start. I always prepare to start. Always prepare to play.
Does he have tears in his eyes?
No, he doesn't, and so far he hasn't had to. But now it's like at some point they may say to him, unless they're waiting for the dramatic thing that Luke just predicted, they're going to have to look him in the eye and say, "Dude, you're a career backup, so you got to go back to your spot here because here's our starter. I don't care, how bad his knee is. He's going to start. He's got to start for whatever reason, because fans want it, because the GM wants it, because he's the guy that should be. For whatever reason, you got to look at this guy in the eye. It's just won 5 ball games for you and tell you, grab some bench, buddy. That can't be easy either.
Kick rocks. Yeah, and before we go, too, I did want to mention that I know we've had a couple dry runs on this, but it's officially happening, and it's amazing, and we've been working diligently on it for this week as a team, but personally, I've been working on this for months. The message board between Vikings Territory and Purple PTSD is a reality. It is up. We're adding content to it. It's basically ready to go. We just haven't advertised it. So by the time this is up, you might see a lot of ads on our social media and on our sites promoting it. It's super easy to use. You can use your Facebook or Twitter account to create an account, so you don't have to remember passwords or anything like that, and it takes 2 seconds to register, and we're hoping to build a community there, and I think it'll be different because a lot of our writers are going to be there on a regular basis, so you can kind of interact with the people that you read stuff from.
Is that going to be where we'll find game day chats when the game's going on?
Okay. It'll be embedded there, and the chat feature will still exist, so it'll be cool because you can direct message people that are in the message board, writers, and then join the game day chats, which thanks for bringing that up because that's going to be huge too. So check that out.
We'll have one this Sunday with the Redskins, right?
Yeah, for sure. We're back on the horse with that. I was waiting for the message board to get ready so we can tie it all together.
You can keep an eye on Purple PTSD Twitter too. If you follow Purple PTSD on Twitter, you'll be able to get links to all that good stuff.
Yeah, and Facebook too. It's going to be kind of omnipresent for the next few weeks because it's asking a lot to have people leave one social media platform for one that we're trying to build, but I think it'll be worth it. So definitely check that out for all of our content since we're turning into this huge network. We definitely want to make sure that you can follow every podcast that we're involved in and every website that we write for too. So definitely wanted to bring that up, and
you can rip Luke's articles there too. He loves it.
Yeah,
I do. I live for this.
We were thinking about branding it as the shit on Luke message board.
That'd be great.
With your face under a toilet seat was the logo. But
nice.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, let's do it. We'll whip that up in Photoshop right now.
I've had it for a long time.
We've been ready for a year.
We went out for coffee that time. But before we go, is there anything you guys wanted to plug? Any articles coming up? I did want to mention too, and I've had this on the list. Please check out Joe's Baiku's if you haven't already, because I haven't genuinely laughed in a long time, if you haven't noticed by all my Bitcoin talk. And some of those were like lower back tattoo worthy. They were so good. They
had a little fun.
Yeah, man, those were. I'm glad that you brought those over.
And they won't be back until next year's by a week. So get them while they're hot.
I'll be jonesing for it. So I'll include a link to that in the article too, so people can check that out. But yeah, you guys have any spicy articles coming up that you can think of, or should we just shut this bee down?
Just no idea what I'm gonna write about. I might write about another team, maybe something about the Lions, or maybe write about the Rams or whoever an upcoming opponent is.
God, we didn't even talk about the Packers, for crying out loud. Oh.
And how the Lions didn't punt the whole game? Like, what's that?
That was so good to watch. Watch the Lions of all teams come into Lambeau and just kill them. Oh, it was so
I did tweet, though. I said, you don't even have to say anything snarky about this Packers team. It's so pathetic that you almost feel like you're piling on.
Yeah,
it's super pathetic.
Isn't that a weird dynamic, though? Like,
guys fired bad.
I've never felt the need not to say something to, like, a Packers fan in public. You know, like, I feel like I can't, because it's just like, kicking them while they're down. Which is their specialty my entire life was to do exactly that, so I should be reveling in it, but maybe that's just the last little bit of my morality left telling me not to do that.
It may come, and I don't want it to, because of how they were exposed on Monday night, but this may be the end of McCarthy and TT, at one or the other.
I think it should be.
It should be, but,
It should be so easy to build a perennial Super Bowl caliber team around Aaron Rodgers, and they have they have failed miserably by putting what we now know as horrible talent around, which we always knew if you paid any attention, but now it's been proven.
Yeah, the quickest way to expose how good a team really is to lose a quarterback of that caliber. And it shows
probably going to be gone. Don Capers is probably going to be
that's who else. Yeah, I was going to say that defensive coordinator. But yeah, that also shows how good the Vikings are, though. We lose two quarterbacks and we're still plugging along. So that's another shout out to Spielman and Zimmer.
It's a very, very well built roster.
Despite what, if anyone listened to the Scold Folks Home first episode, I buried it at the end because I didn't want people to hear that it's the first take and think we were nuts. But one of the guys on the show hates Spielman with a passion, and I don't really understand why. But that was his big grand finale. Go back to Toby Gerhart, I think was his point of contention. He's a super smart guy, and everything else he says is like radio quality. It's just he has this. I don't know if Spielman flipped him off in traffic or something, but there's something there. But anyway,
scars run deep for those old guys. I don't know what they're like, but that's it.
Yeah, literally too. Based on you bring up your knee as much as I bring up Bitcoin.
I do.
One more reference.
I'll stop now. I saw the bone spur, and I had to bring it up because I had the biggest one.
I'm just trying to use your misery as a way to bring up Bitcoins one more time before we go. But this has been the Purple Journal podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening. We are growing week to week based on our analytics, and that's really amazing. I really want to thank everyone who automatically download our show every week onto their devices. That's just like mind-boggling to me that people are listening to my voice, especially considering what it sounds like. You can follow us on social media at purplePTSD on all the major sites except Instagram, at Vikings Territory /Viking Territory on Twitter. Luke, I noticed, I don't know if you want to plug your personal Twitter account, because I don't know, I should probably ask you this beforehand, but I noticed that you're doing some more like personal stuff on Twitter, like to brand what you're doing outside of the fact that you run our Twitter account, because you do deserve credit for that. So I wanted to make sure.
You can follow me. Yeah, you can follow me at SpokenFlow22 on Twitter. You will find me not sticking to sports, but also tweeting a lot about the Vikings. But during game times, make sure you're looking at Purple PTSD, because that's where I'll be live tweeting during games.
And that's very much appreciated and amazing.
And Joe, all I have to say is, for all his listeners out there and drinking this week while they're listening, Bitcoins is a double shot, so you have to take 2 drinks.
Wouldn't they die then?
Yeah, we don't have enough viewers to like kill them.
Yeah, we can't that much alcohol poisoning. But yeah, it's a perfect way to end the show. Check in with us next week and check out the Pocket Protectors podcast and the Scold Folks Home podcast as well. I think Pocket Protectors comes out on Tuesday nights or Wednesday mornings, and Scold Folks Home comes out Tuesday mornings. So with that, this has been the Purple Journal podcast. As I said, thanks for listening.